Welcome back to another episode of the Mind Your Liberty podcast. We're looking at liberty, what it is, why you should care about it, and how to defend it. And today I have a special guest, friend of mine, Nathan Bailey. We've been friends for quite a while, and he is one of the people that I talked to before jumping off into self-employment. He's one of the ones that I asked to pray for me about that decision. So I thought it'd make a great conversation to put on the podcast. And I want to mention it here in the bumper because we forgot to actually talk about it in the episode conversation. But Nathan actually had a motorcycle accident this summer, beginning of the fall, and he's a handyman and he's self-employed. So ordinarily I'd think, man, that would really be a big deal, which of course it was a big deal. But he shared on Facebook how the Lord has just blessed him through this time and how he's basically in pretty decent financial shape after this. And he was just bragging on God and praising God. And also he was announcing how he's venturing out into these financial services that can help people reach such a place. And so I thought, oh my goodness, I've really got to have him on. So I reached out to him. I knew I was going to have a long car ride. So I reached out to him and asked him if he wouldn't mind having a conversation for the podcast while I was driving. So that's what we did. So you might hear some noises. I might seem a little bit distracted. That's because I was driving. Also, we had ended the conversation for the podcast and then kept talking, and then I remembered I wanted to ask him about resources at the end. So I did. I asked him for resources, and so the conversation just kind of starts there and then it ends. And so I'll go ahead and put a bumper at the end. All right, let's get into the conversation. Enjoy. Nathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do now and how did you arrive here?
Yeah, so and I actually have kind of two businesses that I do. The primary one that I do is home remodeling, home repairs, and kind of some general contracting services that I started working in this field about 4 years ago and started my own business about 5 months after that. And then I do financial services as well, and just providing some coaching and counseling for people and help them with their investments and insurance needs that they have for the future. But I never really imagined myself being in this type of work, either one of these really. But a few years back, when I was kind of praying about what God would have me do for my future after serving a couple years at a couple different churches and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, I had kind of seen some stuff in regards to the home repairs, really remodeling, and I hadn't had a ton of experience doing it, but I had a little bit that I enjoyed doing with the different churches that I worked at or with different people that I knew. And when I saw my realtor that helped us buy our first house about 5 years ago, he was starting to expand the services that he offered and offered a home solutions, kind of just repairs. You know, he has a lot of clients that need little things done in order to get their homes ready to sell, or someone buys a house and they need some work done. But a lot of times, you get these big companies or these other guys, they're a lot of times they're booked out 6 or 8 months. Some of them, some of the more reputable ones are a year or 2 years out. And a lot of times these companies are extremely expensive with their with what they do. And so he started offering those services, and I talked to him about it. And it didn't work out for me to start with him at that time. I just didn't feel like I was in a position financially to do that. And then it was a couple months later, it fell through with the guys that he had working for him. that weren't working out. They had their business that they tried to merge with this and make it work out, but it just didn't pan out. So he and I came to an agreement, and I came to work for him, and I had so much to learn, but I spent a lot of time. I tell people I probably spent as much time studying the work that I did as what I did doing it. I can't tell you how many hours and hours I spent in the evenings, YouTubing something or reading about something, learning how to do what I was doing so that I could actually do it properly for my customers. And I wasn't really
awesome.
I wasn't really making a lot of money at that time. We were it was like a fledgling business, and he and I had kind of talked about, this is what I'll get paid. I actually took a pay cut to go work for him, and things were going okay. And then I actually cut my finger on a table saw, and put me out a little bit, set us back. And then a couple months later, man, everything shut down for COVID. And around that same time, I think it might have been right before that it actually shut down. And then, they started giving us the stimulus money. And for years, I didn't make a lot of money, so I just didn't have much. So that extra boost they gave us was like, wow, my bank account just like doubled or tripled. And I almost thought somebody stole money from me because I got a notification from a text saying I had a transaction for like $2,400. And I'm like, that's almost all my money. I'm like, what's going on? And because it didn't tell me it was a deposit. And then I called the bank. And so then I was like, well, I did the math. I knew how much money my wife and I budgeted. I knew how much money we needed to live on for a couple months. I also knew that I could always go back and work where I worked before if it didn't work out. And I prayed about it. And I felt like that was the time for me to just step out and do this on my own. I wasn't making enough money to even invest into tools at that time. And I was, and I talked to the realtor I was working for, and we had kind of came to an agreement on like a referral thing and some benefits he would get from it, but also he would send people my way. And so it was May of 2020, I stepped out on my own, and I was just like, well, this is how much money I need to make. If I don't make this amount of money, in the next month or 2 months, in 2 months, I'll just go get a job working at the factory here in town. And it just took off. My first week, I probably worked 40 hours. I had a few jobs lined up that I did during that time that I had already had lined up before. And then we had a big storm roll through and took out a bunch of trees. And I mean, I was working 10 to 12-hour days just trying to get some of the stuff cleaned up for people. But clients that I'd already done work for that called me needing trees cleaned up, and it just took off. And then lady bought a house, and I just wallpaper and painting some things that I knew how to do, and I knew how to do good or well. And it just, I actually hired a young college student right away, just to do a lot of the general labor stuff. And so over the last 3.5 years, I've just, whether it's throughout different times, had different people working for me, but just picking up, adding new skills to my plate, certain things that three years ago, I was like, no, I'll never do that. And then it's like, some of that's my favorite stuff to do now, and I'm good at it. And a lot of it's because I spent that time studying it and researching it. But it's been pretty exciting and very rewarding, being able to make that extra money, being on my own. Obviously, the risk that comes with that, and a little bit of that stress, dealing with customers and the problems that arise in mistakes or whatever. But being able to invest in with tools, and it's allowed me to be able to have time to work on my own properties and buy a new house and remodel that too. And so that's what I enjoy doing that. And it's fun. And so that's kind of how I got going. And then, so
That's well, thanks for sharing that. So for a little background, you had a job, and I knew you briefly, and then got to know you a little bit, and then all of a sudden you just jumped off into self-employment, and it was it was always kind of a shock to me. And I knew, who you are. And I knew that that was something that you had sought the Lord about. And you wouldn't have done it if you didn't feel like that was what God had for you. And then I just watched get the Lord bless. I saw you get your handyman truck. I don't remember if you got that from JJ Kane or whatever, but
Yeah.
you got that, and then the business took off, and it was a real encouragement to me to watch you profit and be blessed in that endeavor. And then talking to you, we didn't get to get together a whole lot very often, but when we did, you were always an encouragement, and you encouraged me to go do the self-employment thing. Obviously while seeking the Lord's direction. But so one of the reasons I wanted to have you as a guest is because you're one of the first people that comes to mind when I think about kind of economic liberty, right? This podcast is all about liberty, and that covers, everything from civil liberty to spiritual liberty to everything in between. And what I found is, if you're not in a position to absorb a crisis, you're only so free. And I don't know, I kind of think of it, maybe it's a little irreverent, I don't know, but I think of it like, if you're not in a position to kind of stick it to the man, then you're only so free. And, I listen to podcasts, right, where these people are talking about Bitcoin and you got to get your assets into Bitcoin and stuff like this. And these are your steps to liberty. And they're great podcasts of, successful people, stuff like that. In most cases, a lot of cases, people I trust. But I came to the realization that I have got no business worrying about Bitcoin or gold or, anything. Like, I've got some silver from long ago and stuff like that, but I don't have any assets to protect. I've got, I was basically working paycheck to paycheck, like I'm sure a majority of Americans are. I could be mistaken about that, but
Oh yeah,
a lot of people. And I watched you jump out from a kind of normal job into self-employment, and you just thrived. And you weren't doing any crazy marketing campaigns or anything goofy or anything. You're just working hard, and you were killing it. And I watched the Lord bless, and it was an encouragement to me. So I thought you'd be a good guest to have on to talk about getting to that position of kind of financial independence. I mean, maybe neither one of us, even if you don't consider yourself to have arrived there, I'd say you're on the path to becoming more financially free for sure. And then I find out that you're doing a kind of financial advising. I don't know if that's the official word. Is that the official word?
Yeah, I would consider myself to be like a consultant, a financial consultant for people. Yeah, I mean, even though I do sell insurances and things of that nature, it's a need that people have, but also primarily providing guidance to people to their specific situations to help them prepare for the future. So yeah, I mean, counseling, financial consulting, advising, it's kind of all kind of that same thing.
Sure. So, do you have some bullet points or something if to somebody that is starting to realize, like I was, that really, well, COVID really, I'm sure it's the same for you and it was for me, COVID made me realize how at the mercy of the system I am. I wanted to be able to quit if my employer told me to wear a face covering. I just was like, I'm done. I'm walking. If they tell me to wear a face mask, or if they tell me I got to get the jab, I'm walking. And and that's a very real concern for thousands and thousands of Americans and people across the globe. My brother-in-law actually lost his job because he refused to get the the jab, and that's a ridiculous reason to lose your job. And
Sure.
but I was feeling it on a much smaller scale. My employer, I was blessed; they were pretty reasonable. And there was an official dicta that you're supposed to wear a face covering, but generally they didn't really enforce it too much. But that's really, for me, what really got me thinking, like, I need to diversify my income a little bit. Like, if one, this factory was to shut down due to bad economy, then that's not good, because I would be all of a sudden in a job search. And two, like, no matter what, if you're getting really, you could kind of picture us all as contractors. It's just, if you're a W-2 employee, you only have one source of income, and as a self-employer, you can kind of diversify and have your eggs in more baskets. How, circle back to the question, what do you have any recommendations, like things that people need to think about to get financially independent?
Oh man, I think for me, working towards that started with a mindset shift. For a long time, I think I had a little bit of a incorrect view of preparing for the future. And while I am obviously being a Christian and a Bible believer, I recognize the need for faith and to trust God. But at the same time, I also recognize that the Bible has so much to say about money. And even Jesus teaching parables and stories of the there's a principle in the Bible of the one who counts the cost of building a building, lest he has sufficient thereof to finish it, or the one who, if a good man leaves an inheritance into his children's children, and
Yes.
and then also recognizing the dire need for me. I think for me it happened when I got married, but even more so when my first child was on the way, because when I was single, it wasn't a big deal. If I had to, I could just go get a tent and live somewhere, and I'd be all right, But then when I had a wife, I'm like, I'm not going to put her through that. And then when I had kids, I'm like, I got to make sure I have my stuff together, because if I can't pay my bills, I grew up in a family, we struggled. I have family members on both on the other side, both sides that struggle, and people who I didn't want to be the person who lived off the system. I worked in security when I was in going through college, and working at social services, and just seeing people that I remember one lady walked in, and it blew my mind, because most people went there and honestly, they're content with just taking the handout and going. But this lady said, I just moved to the area, and I lost my job or whatever, and she's just trying to get on her feet. She hopes, and she said, I hope I don't have to do this for more than a month or two. And it was like, I want more for my family. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is having a desire for that. Because if the desire to change, if the desire for the financial independence isn't there, or, I don't say this to be mean to people, but a lot of people are just content with mediocrity, and where they're content with just going and working a job. And not that going and working a job is bad, but just getting by. And I didn't want to just get by. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to enjoy what God has given me. I didn't want to be tight and paycheck to paycheck. I wanted to plan ahead. I had heard about pastors, in ministry, and I had worked a couple of years in ministry, and I had talked to a pastor friend of mine that planned ahead for his retirement because he knew he wouldn't be able to pastor forever. And so when that time came, he was prepared for that. And so that it kind of lit a fire in me to do that and to get to that point of financial independence. And then I think I think everyone needs to find a purpose. And ultimately, I mean, obviously, I would believe that we have a purpose and ultimate purpose to glorify God, and to do that in whatever way He has gifted us in, perhaps. And so, and when I recognize that, I don't have to bring in an income from a church, then I was like, I can serve and glorify God in ministry, but then I can go work and do something that He has gifted me at, and take care of my family well, give to His work well, give to others. And so that's when I really began trying to figure out what I really had a desire to do and what I would be good at. And so I think for most people, I think it'd be good just to not settle for mediocrity. And even if they decide that they don't want to be a business owner, or that you can still develop financial independence and that liberty even through the workforce without being self-employed. And obviously there's more depending upon what you do, there's a lot of opportunity in the independence, in the self-employment world. But I think a lot of it is when even people who work a job, it would be good to think ahead and to plan for the future, to do the math and figure out what they need to set aside to get that point, so that when they're 50, when they're 60 years old, they don't have to be dependent on that job, that they have the money and assets that they can be okay. But then also, being willing to work harder for that. I think over the last, I don't know when it started, one of our presidents instituted, that 40-hour work week thing. And, labor union, I think a lot of these things discourage people from working harder and making themselves more valuable to their workforce and to their community, because they all get paid the same whether they produce or not. And that's one thing that when I stepped out in self-employment and I realized that I'm going to get paid according to my production, literally, because I'm not getting paid a salary or an hourly rate. And so that's what was like, boom, it clicked. I'm like, I can make so much money. It's awesome, but then also
you get to realize your own value.
Exactly. And so I think that's one thing that a lot of people miss out on that. And I think a lot of people, they don't strive to be the best in what they do. I look back on even when I was going through school and I was working, I worked a lot of jobs going through college. I worked at Home Depot. I worked at Walmart before I went to college. I worked at Kmart. I worked security. And everywhere I went, I tried to be the best that I could at what I did. When I was at Walmart, I was there for 5 months and I was 18 years old and I turned 19, and they're training me as a customer service manager at Walmart when I'm 18 years old. Why? Because I worked hard and I had good service. And so even at Walmart, there's even that way up in jobs like that. At Home Depot, I worked hard and I was loved by my people, and it was like I could leave and come back anytime, on breaks or whatever, because I provided value. Even the people that I have work for me, I want them to provide value to me, or they're not going to stay with me. And I think that's one thing that with people, no matter where they are, self-employment, or in the workforce, at a factory or whatever it is, be the best that they can be. And when they provide value, it gives them the opportunity to be able to move up, or to be able to get to that point where they're making more money and be able to establish that financial independence in their life as well. So.
Absolutely. And it really, as Christians, right, there's almost no excuse for mediocrity. And granted, different people show forth their, are given different talents, put it that way. But the in the parable of the talents, the person who was just ultra conservative was rebuked in that parable. And
Yeah.
so we're to be, I mean, on a certain level, I think God expects us to take risks because it keeps us leaning on him. And, maybe that's not finances for everybody. Maybe that's, I'm sure it's totally that for me. But in whatever arena you want to talk about, certainly, I think mediocrity is a poor state to be in, because Christ is, we're, as Christians, we're supposed to be salt and light. We're supposed to be making things better. We're supposed to be preserving. And like in that parable of talents, really, on a certain level, we're supposed to be taking risks. Now, obviously, we're supposed to be spirit-led. We're supposed to be seeking the Lord's will. But doggone it, when the Lord leads you to do something, do it. Do it. Whatsoever thy hand finds to do it with thy might, whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do it all to the glory of God. And that's where, that Presbyterian work ethic kind of thing comes in, where and that's really something that I've realized to a fuller extent over the past few years, is that everything I do is worship to the Lord. Like, I am living, they say, coram Deo, like before the Lord. Everything I do is worship to the Lord, whether I'm working for an employer or, growing food in a garden or cleaning the house, whatever. And I try and instill that into my kids, is that we are doing it all as worship, not just as unto the Lord, but it really is our worship to the Lord, whether we're raising our kids or, disciplining or working for an employer or managing our finances or whatever. And that should demand above mediocrity. At least that's my conviction, that it should be the best. And that, of course, is going to be recognized by the market. Whether you're in a company or self-employed, the problem is, if you're in a company, that there can be morons in management that don't see that they're not a good market because they're too stupid. They don't see what they've got. And so, of course, it's a free country. You can go work, go work somewhere where they do see your value. But, at least in the self-employment realm, you're living up, you're rewarded for your own success or mistakes. Granted, you've got to absorb your own mistakes, but I appreciate that about it so far. But anyway, above mediocrity should be the bar should be above mediocrity for Christians. I mean, absolutely. For everybody, but especially for Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people they get so complacent, and I part of it is people don't like to get out of their comfort zone. People don't like to feel uncomfortable. They don't like to do things that are that stretch them. I think it's a natural inclination for everybody, and you have to get over that, and you have to get past that so that you can grow and you can stretch yourself to provide more value to our economy and to provide more value to whoever you're working for. So,
yeah, and I just realized, I think I said Presbyterian work ethic. I meant Protestant work ethic. I don't want to attribute much. But yeah, and thinking about you mentioned some Bible verses, all the verses that talk about money in the Bible, and one that struck me a year or so ago was, when I want to say it's in Timothy, where Paul is giving instructions, and he's saying, let the thief who's now saved steal no more, but let him work honestly with his own hands, but then he didn't stop there, that he might have something to share with those in need. So
Yeah.
there's an implicit abundance there. There's an implicit, an implied, abundance that they are going to be able to be generous. And I say generous because with the caveat, because I think generosity is a mindset, but they're going to be actually to be a blessing, kind of where the rubber meets the road. They're going to have enough abundance from their hard work that they can then be a blessing. And again, in everyone's situation is different, but in times past, I've been like, man, it would be really cool to be able to be a conduit, to be able to, be a blessing to people, not only to those in need, economically, like, the poor among us, so to speak, but actually like missionaries, people who need that money that can't provide directly for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one thing, even going through, I went to Bible college, even going through Bible college, I struggled because, I knew I was planning on going to ministry, and I went into ministry for a couple of years, and I knew I wasn't going to make much money. But the struggle with that was knowing that I wouldn't be able to give much, but yet knowing that I wanted to. And I don't know, like even going through school, and I had a hard time talking with anybody about that, but just that desire that God put in me to give. And I think part of that is because my dad's a pretty generous person too. He's given to his hurt through the years. But also, obviously seeing it in scripture, but then seeing it exemplified in other people, and just wanting to be a financial benefit to so many people and to the work of the Lord. And it's been wonderful, over the last few years, being able to give more than I've ever given before. I remember just a couple of years ago thinking, wow, I just gave more this year than I've given in the last 5 combined. It's like, it just blew my mind.
Wow.
And I think that's one of the wonderful things about working to that point where you have more, is to be able to do that. Because obviously, you can work and work and work, and you can get a lot of stuff, and you can get a lot of gain, and you can get rich, and you can have a nice house, and you can have nice cars, whatever. But then ultimately, at the end of the day, like, that's really not what's going to bring everybody joy. And I think for the most part, people acknowledge that. Even people that have the money, that have abundance, recognize that that's not where the joy comes either. Everybody, I think if people are honest with themselves, they recognize, even the Bible says it's more blessed to give than to receive. And so it's a wonderful thing. Yeah. And I think that obviously, the love of money is the root of all evil, the Bible says. And that we're to be, to set our affection on things above, not on things on the earth. But at the same time, I think that there's nothing wrong with pursuing a financial abundance. Obviously, not to the extent that it's where our heart is and it's where our entire focus is to get. And so Timothy, or Paul warns Timothy against that, to get gain and just to long to be rich. And so I think that is a dangerous mindset. But I also think that it's also dangerous on the other side to, historically, a lot of Christians have thought that poverty was what a Christian was called to. And I would disagree with that, even on a scriptural basis. And so it's really a blessing. While not everyone will experience that, I think that it's okay for people to desire that, and to work towards that. And so, yeah,
it's absolutely. I think it's almost like the verse got rewritten in some circles. Like, instead of the love of money is the root of all evil, that money is the root of all evil. Like, it gets misquoted sometimes, or people misremember it somehow, or they take that as its meaning. They assume that that's be what it actually says. And
Yeah.
it's just not. Like the Bible says, you don't provide for your own household, you're worse than a pagan. Well,
Yep.
it takes money to provide for your own household, right? And I think historically in the context, the household was more than just your wife and kids. The household is your aging parents, your making sure. I think it would make sense to make sure that you're not a burden on your kids when they get old. And these are all things that, I don't know, I'll just plaster it on me, whether it came from influences in my life, I don't know, but I'll just plaster it on me and say, like, I had a wrong mindset about money for a long time, and I'm still working myself out of it. That was very much similar to where you're saying you came from.
Yeah.
And it's been a blessing seeing, and that's actually not the attitude taken in Scripture, that really it's an implied abundance. And I think, and I've obviously going through the documents that I went through on this podcast, I'm just struck over and again by, one, how smart these people were, how prolific writers they were, but how much time they had on their hands, Nathan. Like, these guys were well off enough, and even just leave the slaveholding people out of the equation, like leave Virginia out of the equation. Just talk about the Adams cousins, John Adams and Samuel Adams up in Massachusetts, and John Hancock. These people, well, John Hancock may have had a slave, but the Adams, neither one of them had slaves. And they had enough time, they had enough financial resources to go attend Congress, the provisional continental congresses, under the nose of the government, the standing government, the British government, because they had dissolved their legislatures. They went and they had a provisional continental congress. On top of many of those people were already attending the state politics, whether it be the Massachusetts and then the city, the Boston, all of the body politics stuff there to keep the city running in good order. But then they go and leave for months on end to the Continental Congress, basically all growing season, the whole growing season. Many of these people, were farmers by trade, and they go and spend the whole growing season in Massachusetts, or in wherever the Continental Congress was, Pennsylvania. And it just strikes me like they were considered rich back then. That was just like I don't know, if they saw us today, I don't know what they'd say as how little time we have. Like, obviously we got time to scroll, or yes, there's ways we could carve out more time for writing, but most of these people they journaled extensively, they wrote correspondence. Of course, they couldn't text and stuff, but the correspondence is so voluminous, it just blows my mind. They had time to go tend to the needs of their country, and they had time to write all this, to think. They had time to think about all this stuff, to ponder liberty long enough to come up with these thoughts, and they were obviously they were standing on the shoulders of other people who had thought before them, like Algernon Sidney and Blackstone and other people. But they had time to read all that. And here, I can't make it to a stinking city council meeting. I probably could, but it just, like I said, or I didn't say, I was getting to, all that rambling was getting to the point that, like, there's an implied level of financial independence to be able to make sure you're not a burden to your family when you get old, or God forbid something
Yeah.
happens where you injure yourself, but like you can. I don't want to be a burden to my kids, and furthermore, I'd like to be able to take care of my parents when that day comes. And doggone it, I'd love to have time to. I'm not saying that there's any 1776 moments coming up or anything like that. I'm just saying it would be, this country was built on the presupposition that the populace, the members of the body politic, would be interested in the political affairs and have time to educate themselves upon the matters and represent their fellow citizens. Like, not saying everybody can. Obviously, everybody didn't have time to go play politician, but they could take turns to represent their neighbors. And we just don't have that today. Like, most people are just concerned with the Chiefs game, on Sunday, and they don't care. Like you said, everyone's kind of in a slump of mediocrity.
Yeah, it's the financial independence. I mean, whether it's getting active in politics, and there's benefits that come with it, not just politically, but even in my personal experience with being able to serve in other ways. I've never attended a city council meeting, but I've been able to had the blessing of taking time off to go help. This summer we just remodeled my brother-in-law's. Well, I guess remodeled is a light word. I guess rebuilt my brother-in-law's bathroom in the basement, and literally from below the foundation up, and took. It was great to be able to take a couple of weeks off work. And obviously we vacationed at the same time, went to DC, had a great time there. It was great learning some more history there too, or seeing things. It's like, man, I've dreamt of this since I was a kid. And then, we had some events here at the church, and being able to take the time off work to just serve in the children's ministries. And that's one thing that a lot of people that are in the employment field don't get that. But it's not even just the, oh yeah, I have time, but it's also great because it's like, I have the money. A lot of people,
Yeah.
It's like they can't afford to take 2 days off work because they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
And we've had that blessing of, obviously we've made good money doing it. We've also made choices in order to get to that point. And I think that it takes sacrifice at times, being willing to give certain things up, to not live a certain type of lifestyle. And obviously, in the last 3 or 4 years, our lifestyle has increased. Our cost of living has significantly gone up compared to what it was 4 years ago. But, overall, and we've been enjoying some of the fruits of our labor, but at the same time, we have to let some things go at times in order to be able to have the means to be able to do more and serve more in other ways. And that's one thing that financial independence really does bring, is that opportunity to serve in many different capacities, whether it's in the political sector, or it's in the church, or even just in the community, being able to go do things for people and give of myself to, sometimes people are like, how much do we owe you? I'm like, don't worry about it. Not to build myself up, as I don't do that very often, a few times every now and then. Usually it's something small, but it's great to be able to serve and do things for people that genuinely actually need it. Where if they paid me, it would be a strain on them for it. Or even if they could afford it, it's like, you've done so much for me, or you've done so much for our church. This is a little that I can do for you. And so that's another wonderful thing that it does bring. So.
Yes. And absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, that the generosity is kind of a mindset. It goes, like, you can be generous at whatever income level you're at. I think Oh, well, I was just reading C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, and he has a chapter in there on charity, on Christian charity, and his assertion is that you're, it should basically always be uncomfortable. Like if you're not uncomfortable, you're not really you're not giving properly. And so I'll leave it to the theologians to argue that one out. But I'd say it's probably a decent rule. And I was going somewhere with that. What was I going to say? That I was saying how Samuel Adams, John Adams, and Hancock and all that, they had the time and money to go do this. But I will also point out that most of the founding fathers were financially ruined. Like they never recouped any of it. Like we owe them a debt. Like we have a country now. Like we haven't done so well with it, but we have a country. But like Thomas Jefferson and Washington, I think both died with their estates horribly in debt, and they never really were able to recuperate from what they gave to the country in terms of between the pre-war years of the politics and representation and the actual war years. In Washington's case, gave 7 years of his life just to that, and then another 4 years after the Constitution was ratified, to the presidency, or another 8 years, excuse me. So yeah, it can hurt. Like, to be generous, it can be hurt. It's not, and nothing to anybody listening. Like, none of this is to be like, nothing Nathan's saying, nothing I'm saying. Like, none of it's to be braggadocious, except to brag on God. Really, like, just because you work hard and stuff, not everybody's gonna come out to the same thing. Like, that's up to God, and each of us need to be sensitive to the leading of the Holy Spirit. And like, I mean, it's just the way it is. Some people are dealt a different hand. Like if you're born with a impairment or something, like, this is not to say like they're less of a person because they don't have a means to provide in the same way that we do. And on the contrary, that should be all the more challenging to those that can, to do all they can so that they can be a blessing to their brothers and sisters in Christ and to the world around them, that they can be salt and light to the world around them. So again, I just want to brag on God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you've got any other points like that you wanted to share in regards of kind of the blessing of getting financially independent or anything like that, do you have a way that if somebody wanted to reach out to you for the financial services you offer or anything, do you have anything you wanted to share that they could get in touch with you? You don't have to. That's totally optional. Yeah,
I mean, if anyone, whether it's they want some just some general guidance or to a checkup to just see if they're on track for that, or even if it's some help, whether it's with their personal finances, maybe an insurance need that they might have, life insurance or whatever, I'd be glad to help with that. Or also, planning for retirement. And then, or even just, like me, I had people that influenced me and that I had talked to and that I had listened to in trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so it helps sometimes to have somebody to talk to and to help provide some guidance or to ask thought-provoking questions in that area, even just to figure out a path for whether, even if you're interested in some self-employment and trying to figure out what you want to do even more than what you're doing now, then there's different resources that I've used for that. But I'd be glad for if anybody wanted to reach out to me on Facebook or even my phone number. I don't care. It's on my truck. it's on my truck. It's on my business page. People can contact me there. I mean, you can get it through the city website if you wanted to. it's just, so to me, it's not a big deal if people have my phone number, but if anybody wanted to just look me up on Facebook or, reach out to Andy here and he can get you in contact with me, I'd be glad to help you, be glad to provide any guidance for you, or even just get you connected with some resources and some people that I have listened to that helped me along the way in making some of these decisions, and kind of a little bit in transforming that mindset that I have towards the work that I do and the financial situation that I have. So.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to share your business name so they can look you up on Facebook?
Yeah.
Or do you just want them to go through it?
On Facebook, it may be a little hard to find me. I'm not sure. Bailey's Services is my primary Facebook. It's the only business page I have. Just Bailey's Services, BAILEY' Services. That's my home remodeling business, and anyone can reach out to me through there. Even if I don't have a Facebook page for my financial services, but you could get my phone number off my business page there, or just search my name, Nathaniel Bailey, and I'm sure there's another 100 of those out there. But or you could always reach out to Andy here, and he could get you that as well.
Yeah. And that's mindyourliberty@gmail.com is the email address I monitor for the podcast. So, Nathan, unless you had anything else to share, I wanted to thank you for your time and the thoughts. I think it's been a good conversation. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Good.
And it'll be a benefit.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I definitely enjoy talking about these things. It's something that I think a lot of people shy away too much from talking about, finances and talking about the career paths and things of that nature. And so I think it's important to talk about, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
I meant to ask you, do you have any book recommendations? Are there any podcasts or book recommendations you'd have for the audience?
Yeah, really, Dave Ramsey has a lot of good content. He's been a huge influence in my life in the financial world. And he's got his book, Total Money Makeover. I think it's a great introductory book and foundational for the foundations of finances and the proper steps to being financially independent. And then he's got some of the people that have influenced me there. Ken Coleman, he's also got a podcast, but he's on the Ramsey Solutions team. Big guy with the career stuff. And he was a big help to me personally in helping me try to think about and figure out what I wanted to do. And so I would recommend some of his podcasts and his books too. There's a lot of people that call in there that are struggling and that they want some guidance. A lot of people that just might even need some guidance in trying to find the right place to work. Not necessarily being self-employed, but just trying to find the right place to work or the right role for them. And he's a good source for that. So, But yeah, I think those two are really a lot of probably the two heavy hitters when it came to influencing me. I mean, there's others as well, but I would recommend those for sure.
Good deal. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Nathan. And I'd like to ask you if you have any feedback, you like it, love it, hate it, have suggestions, topic ideas, anything like that. If you want to get in touch with Nathan, you can email me at mindyourliberty@gmail.com, and I will make sure that I respond or get you Nathan's information. Hopefully we were able to make the connection again between liberty and the finances and how that all goes together. If you don't think there's any connection, if you didn't like the episode, again, send me some feedback. I'd love to hear. Again, I can't promise when I'm going to have any new episodes out. Still don't have a real schedule. Just fitting these in where I can. Mostly just, again, conversations that I'd like to have anyway. Figured more people could benefit from them. So until the next episode, be sure and mind your liberty.